The children stood in a perfect line on his porch like condemned prisoners awaiting judgment. 7 of them, ranging from a boy who couldn't be more than 5 to a girl nearly grown, all staring at him with eyes that had seen too much. Their clothes were patched and clean, but their faces carried the hollow look of hunger that soap couldn't wash away. "Our mama's inside," the oldest girl said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She's dying, mister. Consumption took hold last winter and won't let go." Jake Morrison had been alone on this homestead for 3 years, ever since Sarah died in childbirth, along with their son. He'd grown accustomed to silence, to meals eaten standing by the window, to conversations with his horse that never talked back. The isolation had become a second skin, comfortable in its predictability. But now, these children had appeared like ghosts from his abandoned dreams, carrying with them the scent of desperation and something else. Hope, maybe, or its dying ember. "She sent us to find you," the second oldest, a boy with his father's jaw, continued. "Heard tell you were a good man, a lonely man." Jake's throat tightened. Through his cabin's open doors came the sound of labored breathing, each exhale a battle won and lost simultaneously. He'd heard that sound before, watched it take Sarah from him one rattling breath at a time. "What's she want with me?" he asked, though part of him already knew. The children exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them like a shared secret. The youngest boy stepped forward, his small hand reaching for Jake's calloused fingers. "She wants you to marry her," he whispered, the words barely audible above the prairie wind, "before she goes to Jesus, so we won't be orphans no more." The silence that followed stretched like a taut rope. Jake stared at these 7 young souls who somehow found their way to his doorstep, carrying an impossible request. Inside his cabin, a woman he'd never met lay dying, asking him to become a father to children who weren't his, a husband to a ghost. The oldest girl's eyes never left his face. "Will you at least meet her, mister? Please?" Jake Morrison had wanted a family once, had built this cabin with rooms for children who never came, had carved a cradle that Sarah never got to use. Now family had come to him, but wrapped in grief and desperation, asking him to love the shadow of a woman and raise the children of strangers. His hand was already reaching for the door. She was beautiful even in dying. Mary Catherine lay propped against his pillows, her dark hair spread like spilled ink across the white cotton. Her eyes, the same deep brown as her children's, tracked his movement as he entered. When she spoke, her voice carried the ghost of laughter. "I know this seems like madness," she said, each word measured against the air in her lungs. A dying woman asking a stranger to take on her burdens. Jake removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his rough appearance. "Ma'am, let me speak while I can." She gestured to the chair beside the bed. "My husband died in a mining accident 18 months ago, left us with nothing but these children and each other. We've been moving from town to town, me taking wash and mending when I was strong enough, them working when they could find it." Through the window, Jake could see the children waiting in his yard. The older ones kept the younger ones in line, their small society functioning with military precision, born of necessity. "Why me?" he asked. Mary Catherine's smile was answer enough. She'd heard about the lonely rancher who lived decent and alone, who had money enough to feed hungry mouths and land enough to give children room to grow. Word traveled in small communities, and desperate people listened to every whisper. "I won't lie to you, Mr. Morrison. I'm asking you to be their father when I can't be their mother anymore. To give them your name so they won't be scattered to the 4 winds when I'm gone. And you, what about you?" Her laugh turned into a cough that shook the bed frame. "I'm asking you to be kind to a dying woman, to let me pass knowing my children are safe." Jake studied her face, searching for deception, and finding only exhaustion. Outside, he could hear the children's voices, the older ones teaching the younger ones a clapping game, their laughter thin but real. "I barely know how to take care of myself," he admitted. "They'll teach you. Children are better teachers than most folks realize." The moral weight of her request settled on his shoulders like a yoke. He could say no, send them on their way with some money and his prayers, let the county decide their fate when she died. Or he could step into a life he'd never planned, become father to 7 children and husband to a woman who might not live to see another season. Through the thin cabin walls came the sound of approaching hoofbeats, multiple horses moving fast. Mary Catherine's eyes widened with fear. "They found us," she whispered. The horses thundered to a stop in a cloud of dust that obscured Jake's view of the riders. Through the settling haze, he counted 5 men, their faces hard beneath wide-brimmed hats. The leader, a thick-set man with silver threading his beard, dismounted with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "Mary Catherine O'Malley," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "We know you're in there." The children had frozen mid-game, clustering together like startled birds. The oldest girl, Emma, Mary Catherine had called her, stepped protectively in front of the younger ones. "Who are they?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. "County officials," Mary Catherine whispered, her breathing more labored now. "And my brother-in-law, Thomas. He wants to take the children back to Chicago, split them up among relatives who will work them like servants." Jake moved to the window, studying the men. Thomas O'Malley had the look of a man who measured everything in terms of profit and loss. The county badge on the shorter man's vest caught the afternoon sun. "Mrs. O'Malley," Thomas called again, "we have legal documents. These children belong with family, not dragging around the countryside with a sick woman." Emma's voice carried clearly across the yard, young but defiant. "We won't go with you, Uncle Thomas. Mama said we don't have to." "Child, your mama's not well. Can't make proper decisions. Now, gather your things." Jake's hands clenched into fists. He'd seen men like Thomas before, those who wore respectability like a mask while calculating how to profit from others' misfortune. The county official looked uncomfortable but determined, probably convinced he was doing the right thing by enforcing the law. "They have legal right," Mary Catherine said behind him. Unless what? "Unless you're their legal father. A husband's claim supersedes all others." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. Outside, Thomas was growing impatient, gesturing for his men to dismount. The county official was examining a sheaf of papers, preparing to make his authority known. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Minutes, maybe less." Jake looked at the children in his yard, then at the dying woman in his bed, then at the men who would scatter this family to the winds for the sake of legal propriety and personal gain. His whole life had led to this moment, this impossible choice between his comfortable solitude and the messy, terrifying responsibility of instant fatherhood. Thomas O'Malley was walking toward the cabin now, his papers in hand and certainty in his stride. "What do I need to do?" Jake asked. "The preacher's book," Mary Catherine gasped, pointing toward a small leather satchel by the door. "My husband was a circuit preacher before the mining. I kept his Bible, his ceremony book." Jake's hands shook as he retrieved the worn volume. The pages fell open to a section marked with a faded ribbon. Wedding ceremonies, the words familiar yet suddenly foreign in their weight and meaning. "Emma," Mary Catherine called through the window, "bring everyone inside, quickly now." The children filed in, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. Thomas O'Malley's boots echoed on the porch steps, growing closer. "Mama," the youngest boy whispered. "Mr. Morrison is going to be your new papa," Mary Catherine said, her voice somehow finding strength in extremity. "Right now, today. Do you understand?" The children's faces transformed, confusion giving way to something Jake recognized as desperate hope. These weren't naive children. They understood exactly what their mother was arranging and why. Emma stepped forward, her young face serious beyond her years. "Do you want to be our papa, Mr. Morrison?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Jake looked at each face. Michael with his father's strong jaw, little Annie clutching a cornhusk doll, the twins who stood so close they seemed like one soul in 2 bodies, Benjamin with his serious eyes, and Thomas Jr., barely old enough to understand but wise enough to fear abandonment. Jake's voice caught. He thought of Sarah, of the children they'd planned to have, of the empty rooms in his cabin that had echoed with silence for 3 years. Heavy footsteps stopped just outside the door. "Yes," he said, the word coming from somewhere deeper than thought. "Yes, I do." Mary Catherine's smile was radiant despite her pallor. She reached for Jake's hand with fingers as fragile as winter twigs. "Then we'd better hurry," she whispered. Jake opened the preacher's book, his eyes scanning unfamiliar words. But as he looked at Mary Catherine, this brave woman who was giving everything she had left to protect her children, the words began to make sense. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice growing stronger with each syllable, "we are gathered here." Through the window, he could see Thomas O'Malley's shadow darkening the doorframe. But inside this small cabin, something sacred was taking place. A marriage born not of romance but of desperate love. A family being forged in the crucible of necessity. Mary Catherine squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "I do," she whispered, though he hadn't yet asked the question. The shadow on the porch shifted, and Jake heard the distinctive sound of papers being unfolded. "By the power vested in me," Jake said, his voice carrying across the small room, "I now pronounce us husband and wife." The kiss was gentle, barely a whisper against Mary Catherine's fevered lips. But in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the cabin's atmosphere. The children were no longer orphans. She was no longer dying alone, and Jake Morrison was no longer a lonely man counting empty days. Thomas O'Malley's fist hammered against the door. "Open up! We have legal authority!" Jake stood, straightening his shoulders. When he opened the door, he faced Thomas with the quiet confidence of a man defending his own. "Gentlemen," he said calmly. Thomas thrust his papers forward. "We're here for the O'Malley children. Their mother is unfit to—" "The Morrison children," Jake corrected, "and you're standing on my property." The county official stepped forward, squinting at Jake with confusion. "Morrison, these are the O'Malley orphans. We have documentation. You have outdated documentation," Jake replied. "I'm Jake Morrison, and that's my wife Mary Catherine Morrison in there. These are our children." Thomas's face flushed red. "That's impossible. Mary Catherine has been widowed over a year." "Not anymore." Jake produced the preacher's book, still open to the ceremony page. "Married not 10 minutes ago, with all 7 children as witnesses." The county official examined the book, his frown deepening. "This appears to be official." He looked up at Jake. "You're claiming legal guardianship?" "I'm claiming fatherhood." From inside the cabin came Mary Catherine's weak but clear voice. "Thomas O'Malley, you get off our property this instant. My children are exactly where they belong." The children appeared in the doorway behind Jake, Emma's arm around little Annie, the boys standing tall despite their youth. They looked like what they had become, a family. Thomas spat, teared protests about proper procedures and family obligations, but the county official was already folding his papers. "The law is clear, Mr. O'Malley. A legal father's claim supersedes all others. These children have a home." As the riders departed, raising dust that settled like a blessing over the homestead, Jake returned to his wife's bedside. Mary Catherine's breathing was shallower now, but her eyes were peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. She died 3 days later, as the first snow began to fall. But she died Mary Catherine Morrison, and her children bore their new father's name. Years later, when Emma Morrison married the banker's son and little Annie became the town's first female doctor, they would tell their children about the day a lonely cowboy became their father, not through blood, but through choice. They would speak of Mary Catherine Morrison, who used her last breath to secure their future. And Jake Morrison, surrounded by grandchildren in the cabin he'd once thought too quiet, would remember the moment 7 children taught him that family isn't always born. Sometimes it simply arrives at your door, asking if you're brave enough to love. The wind still whispered across the prairie, but now it carried the sound of children's laughter, and Jake Morrison was no longer listening alone. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.